You know Macumba? Voodoo. Granddad was a priest in Trinidad. He used to tell us, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk here.
What we are dealing with here is a perfect engine.
What's your favorite scary movie?
It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop until you are dead.
I can't lie to you about your chances. Yeah. You have my sympathies.
Hello everyone, I'm Quinn Bailey.
And I'm Max Corman.
And welcome back to Sometimes They Come Back, where this week we will be discussing a slightly more obscure franchise from our last episode. Last week we talked about a big franchise. This week we are going the opposite, and we are going to be talking about the relatively obscure but also relatively infamous 80s slasher movie Sleepaway Camp, and its four terrible sequels.
Would you say Sleepaway Camp is more obscure than, what's it called, ABCs of Death?
I guess not. I think more people know it as a single film.
Right, yeah. I would
because I think it, as a franchise, it's more obscure than the ABCs of Death. But as a film on its own, Sleepaway Camp is definitely less obscure.
It's funny because I showed you this. One of my favorite Robot Chicken jokes is they had one 10-minute sketch about Sleepaway Camp, and then the joke was, oh my god, someone remembered this film and decided to do a comedy sketch about it. What a twist. It's like, hey, I like this movie. And
yeah, it's definitely very much a cult favorite as far as these kind of movies go.
Yeah, so this is our first foray into one of my favorite genres of horror, which is the summer camp, sleepaway camp, blank camp in the forest slasher.
Actually, is this our first real full-on slasher? I think this is our first real slasher
franchise. Yeah, with
franchise.
a singular killer, because Saw is not a slasher.
Saw's not really a slasher.
Children of the Corn is not a slasher.
Children of the Corn...
ABCs of Death had slasher
It had slasher
moments.
bits, but it's not really
segments.
a full one. So this is where we get to dive into what was really one of the biggest subgenres of horror from sort of the 70s through the 80s, and even up until the 90s. It's still kind of one of the biggest subgenres of horror. Slasher movies are popular.
Oh, I forgot to mention, though, that this series is obscure, but for whatever reason, in the 80s, they decided to ape off the name and do a Son of Sleepaway Camp, which is not in the series, so we're not going to review it.
Which we did not watch, because we do not want to watch any more Sleepaway Camp sequels at this point.
It's not related. There's no Sleepaway Camp. It's about, a caveman who's killing people. It's actually called, Massacre Valley something or other, buzzword. But they just put that title on to ape off the success of Sleepaway Camp, but it wasn't, super successful, so I'm confused.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it would be much more satisfying as a sequel than Sleepaway Camp 4, but we'll get to that.
Or 3,
or 2,
or
or
5.
3, or 5.
One of the things I find fascinating about this movie, especially the series, is that it could be read as either very tone-deaf and outdated, or very, very, very progressive. It all depends on how you read it and at what angle.
Yeah, and we'll get to that, but
I've heard both sides.
There's points where I think even, the film itself is kind of contradicting whether or not it can be read that way. But we'll get to that, because that's spoilery.
I will also say, if you have not seen Sleepaway Camp 1, I highly suggest you do that now. It's one of my favorite summer camp horror movies.
It is a very interesting slasher.
I really, really like it.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but...
yeah, it is definitely very much an 80s slasher, and... I
think it's
we know
better
I have
than
my
most...
mom listening to this, so we should at least give a little bit of sort of the definition of what the traditional slasher movie is for people who really aren't that well versed in what it is. So basically, sort of near the end of the 70s, you get a series of films sort of like Halloween, probably most famously, but other stuff like Black Christmas, Italian movies like A Bay of Blood, and the films of Dario Argento. Sort of creating the genre that we come to know as a slasher, which is usually a horror story that is very much based around a single, usually human, but sometimes not, sometimes someone like Freddy Krueger. It's a singular killer, usually, and a lot of it is very much focused around sort of the horrors of, a large cast of characters that sort of die gruesomely one by one. So it's a very simple horror genre, but it really took off in the 80s with the success of stuff like the Halloween franchise and Friday the 13th and The Nightmare on Elm Street. And it inspired a lot of very interesting variations on the genre. It also inspired a lot of terrible movies. because of just how prevalent.
Oh yeah,
it
the
was at
batting
time.
average for slashers is probably most definitely like not good.
It's a
pretty
very low batting average, but when they hit out of the park, there's a
will
lot
say,
of actually interesting filmmaking.
I
to be
think
found.
Black Christmas, the original '70s one, is brilliant.
Black
I
Christmas
think that's
is
a legitimately brilliant film.
Black Christmas is incredible. We'll discuss that
The
eventually.
sequels are funny. They're different.
Black Christmas is a very interesting slasher movie with
The
some cool
remakes.
feminist social commentary. Halloween is a masterpiece. I have an affectionate spot for the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. The first 3, we'll get to those. We'll also get to Friday the 13th.
That's kind of my big guilty pleasure in cinema is how much I like the Friday movies. I understand it's kind of weird to like them as much as I do, and I accept that now. I've come to peace with. I just have a really weird fascination with Jason Voorhees for some reason. Those movies, even especially like the Kane Hodder era.
So Jason Voorhees is the object of your obsession,
Uh,
the way Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' object of obsession.
Yeah, I don't know. I go months without thinking about those movies, but you know I do have a soft spot for how blunt and stupid they are. They're very cozy movies.
We're going to be discussing Friday the 13th. I think we can confirm this now. On August 13th, which is actually Friday the 13th this year, we will be doing an episode on Friday the 13th. And it is going to be an episode with a lot of sidebars. Because for one thing, we have to explain Friday the 13th, Part 3, 3D. And that's a can of worms that we're going to open another time.
Right, our first 3D movie of
Our
the
first 3D
podcast.
movie, and oh god, is it a doozy. But we're getting sidetracked. Anyways, the point is that in the 80s, slashers were big money. You could make them for cheap. All you really needed for one was like a good location, a cast of characters that you could kill off, some decent kills, and good effects. And with that, you could make a slasher. You even especially saw it when home video technology started getting especially popular, so you got a lot of direct-to-video or shot-on-video slashers, and
of
they
course,
were very prevalent.
You got the tropes. They're all younger. They're usually like 20-something-year-olds playing teens. They're doing sex, drugs, rock and roll. Final Girl is an important motif. The Puritan, the innocent person who ends up outsmarting the killer because they aren't focused on evil sin, I guess. I don't know.
That's kind of an interesting thing. That's something that's interesting about the slasher, because it kind of... You definitely can see the slasher as a product of... Especially the more popular slashers as a product of sort of the more puritanical values of the Reagan 80s. Even though there are a lot of slashers that do break that trend. Like Black Christmas, I mentioned before, is not necessarily true to that. It's a lot more feminist in tone. So there's still a lot of wiggle room as to how you can interpret slashers politically or socially. And honestly, I think we've discussed this enough to really dive in on 1983's Sleepaway Camp, directed by Robert Hiltzik, also written by Robert Hiltzik.
It was his first of 2 movies, and yeah, let's. So my relation with this movie is I went in more or less blind off of a recommendation while I was in high school from like a YouTube channel, and they said, "Hey, you should check this out." And it's a short movie. It's an hour 24. It's a very short movie, and I think it holds up. And I think what's about a character. She's a young shy girl named Angela. In her past, there was this terrible accident involving a boat that left her sibling and her father dead. Father's dead. We can get into that because we don't know that at that point. Either way, she moves in with her cousin and her aunt, and then her cousin and Angela go to Sleepaway Camp for the summer. And Angela, the shy girl, is mercilessly bullied, and people around her start dying mysteriously. The counselor is the head counselor is trying to cover it up, trying to keep this camp afloat. People are dying. We're trying to figure out who the killer is.
And then there's a twist.
And then there's a twist, which is what most people know the movie for, the twist.
And we'll get to the twist. I think it's probably best if we talk about the movie itself before we really get to the twist, because that's
I will say
kind of the capstone to the whole film.
The first thing that stands out for me in this movie is, well, the big thing is, as I mentioned before, in a slasher movie, you usually have 20-something-year-olds playing teens. This movie probably most accurately depicts actual teens, because these are real kids playing kids,
Yeah.
and
they're jerks.
a lot of them are. There's like a lot of there's a variety of them, but when they want to be mean, there's some really mean kids.
Yeah. I think this movie, probably more than a lot of 80s movies, kind of gets how bullying works. Because in a lot of 80s movies, you'll usually see that archetype of like, oh, there's like the one bully, and it's like the one kid picking on everyone. Whereas in this, it's just a lot of people. It's just like, there are a couple bullies, but like everybody else kind of joins in because they just want to be with
peer
like,
pressure.
the popular kids. It's peer pressure. And that kind of feels like one of the things that stands out to me about this film, because it kind of gets how kids are more than your usual slasher film.
Right. No, it's like, it's a much more realistic portrayal of kids. So something I really like about this genre of slashers, of the sleepaway camp, the summer camp thing, is I've had like moments of that in my life. I've gone to summer camp, and not for like whole summers, but I've done overnights, and I've done some camping in the Puget Sound, with kind of like this, and this just makes me nostalgic for it, which is funny, because I did not have that much. I didn't have a bad time with kids like Angela does, but these kids definitely felt more real.
Yeah.
And at the same time, despite all this horrific stuff, I'm still somehow nostalgic for this kind of moment that I used to kind of have every once in a while.
Maybe it's part of just the atmosphere of the film, because
Right.
it definitely has like an extremely 80s atmosphere to it. It's like, this feels like, this and Friday the 13th are probably the films that are like, if you tried to imagine what like the purest, most ultimate 80s slasher would be, these would probably be the films you would think of, because this is just like, it's very classical formula.
Something that would be what I love about these movies also, that is going to be off-putting to most people, but I really like how a lot of it, maybe not most of it, is kind of just a hangout film, like a documentary. This is like, a lot of this movie is just a documentary about bullying at summer camp.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just kids being kids and being evil and helping, the brother, Ricky, trying to protect Angela from the bullying.
While also still being an incel.
Ricky's
kind of a creep.
complicated. He's a creep, he's an incel, but he's trying to protect his sister.
He's a creepy incel, but he also really cares about Angela as a friend and wants to look out for her, but he's also a total sleazeball.
He is he is, all of these characters, even the nice characters, end up being problems. Like, what's his name? I think his name was Ben, or the kid that maybe I'm making up a name.
Paul.
Paul.
I think it's Paul.
Paul, he's a nice guy to Angela, but then he also, it's... I don't want to say that these characters are complicated, because this is just an 80s slasher movie made on a low budget and a first-time filmmaker, but they are...
It's not that they're really that complicated,
They're just
it's that
more
they're a
real.
little more real
Right.
than you usually get with a slasher movie. And just up to the point where just everyone's resentment and frustration towards Angela is just like, wow, they just really don't need much of a reason to hate her. They just kind of...
Well, because she's a quiet kid. She's
the quiet kid. She's the one, like, it's easy to pick on because she's the easy target. But even then, it's just all the lengths they go to just
like that.
Mess with her.
My heart melts every time when she's talking with Paul at like the dance or whatever it was, and then she speaks for the first time, and she's like, "See you around" or something. It's just so touching.
It's so sweet.
Felissa Rose nailed it as Angela.
Felissa Rose is really good in this movie. Like, she is... there's a reason... There is a big reason later on why her performance in this becomes really iconic for this series, but she is excellent in this film. She does a performance that doesn't use a lot of words. A lot of it's very non-verbal and, like, withdrawn. But the film kind of has a lot of empathy for her. Like, you feel for her because the film itself kind of feels for her. And that's, like, something that really works about this. Another thing I think also works about this is the way it does your usual slasher movie violence, which is very interesting. Because usually you get a lot of very gory slasher films, and if anything, this is a lot closer to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in that it doesn't really show a lot of gore on screen. A lot of it's just cut away from, or they use sort of oblique editing or shots in it, and a lot of it's just left up to your imagination, which kind of makes it worse.
I would actually say it's more akin to the Halloween 2018 level of violence, where a lot of it is seen after the aftermath, and the aftermath is gross. Like the kid who was drowned by the killer. You see like the snake you see his body later, and it's horrifying. Or like the scene with the deep frying oil spilled on the guy. That's pretty gross.
Also, that guy is gross because
yeah, did we need a pedophile in this movie? No.
we did not.
We really didn't.
We didn't need like a creepy pedophile, but hey, at least he gets gets boiling water dumped all over him. And that's the weird thing. Why is he the only victim in this movie who doesn't die?
Right, they said
the pedophile is the one who doesn't die, and that's kind of fucked up.
He's disfigured, but he's still alive.
Yeah.
I will say, I also agree, though, the curling iron scene, they knew what not to show.
Oh, the curling iron scene. I don't even want to describe that one, because that one's actually the one that got to me the most out of any kill in the movie. It's the one that's genuinely the most disturbing. Because I'm not going to really say what that scene is, but I'm going to say it could have been so easily exploitative in a gross and sexualized way. And Robert Hiltzik, as a director, has enough respect to cut around it, to keep it limited.
He
to
uses
not
shadows really well in
it.
that shot.
The use of shadows in that scene is horrific. It kind of... I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but it reminds me of Nosferatu. Yes, I just compared Sleepaway Camp to Nosferatu. Yeah. What am I doing?
Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff to before we get into the
meat of the film, which is like its final minute.
Let's talk about really quickly. So some of the smaller things I like. Well, big things, different elements. I really like the score. It's a very classic '80s score with like the very first song is great. The performances are. You got James Earl Jones's father is in this movie. John Earl, something Earl Jones.
Robert Earl Jones.
Robert Earl Jones, and he kind of disappears from the movie, but it's funny because well, it's not funny, but like he's a nice guy, but like actually a pleasant character. Except the pedophile is being openly creepy around him, and then Robert Earl Jones is just like, "Oh, that's just all your shenanigans." It's like, no, this guy's talking about crimes. What are you doing, Robert Earl Jones? Karen Fields does a really good job of playing the most hateable character in the... Well, second most hateable character in the franchise. Second most, and that's Judy.
Most.
The most is Alan. We'll get to that later.
We'll get to Alan.
But Judy is...
Alan, the Jeff of this franchise.
Judy is great as, like, just the most despicable bully.
Yeah.
I also really like the outfits are... I'm glad I was not alive in the 80s, because those outfits are wild. Everyone's dressed in, like, the tightest shorts, and, like, I don't know what people were on in the 80s.
I know what we're missing.
The baseball scene?
The baseball scene is great, but we haven't talked about Aunt Martha yet.
Aunt Martha
is one of the strangest performances I've ever seen in a slasher film. I love it.
She's in the movie for about 2 minutes, and she steals the show.
Because it is just the... How would you describe her performance, Max? I don't know.
It's like, her performance, she's doing something, is probably going to pay off. Not, like, kind of, but she's mostly just acting weird for no discernible reason.
Very strange and stiff, and I kind of have some ideas on it as it pertains to the ending, but we'll get into sort of my interpretation of that later. But the baseball scene.
Also, the baseball scene, there's just a prolonged baseball scene. With my favorite insult of the series, an older teen tells Ricky, "Eat shit and die," and then he retorts with, "Eat shit and live," which I don't think is a very good comeback, but everyone in the movie was like, that burn you will not heal from.
It's like just saying to someone, "Oh yeah, no you," and then just having people just erupt into cheers around you.
I'm pretty sure eating shit and dying is worse than eating shit and living. But
yeah, because I mean you're eating shit in both, but you don't survive one, which is probably worse than living.
But it's just a prolonged baseball scene where everyone's in short shorts and whatnot, and they're trash talking each other.
Oh, can we talk about how intense? Okay, I think we need to talk about how intensely homoerotic this film is.
Oh, this is Nightmare on Elm Street 2
This is
levels.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2 levels of homoerotic, and I don't mean that as a joke. I genuinely mean this. There has been a lot of queer theory pertaining to this film. Part of the fact is that Angela's parents before their death are like one of the most positive portrayals of a gay couple I've seen in like a classic horror film. Like they're not really judged for being gay. They're just kind of there. I mean, they still died, but
Yeah, there's
it's
that.
very non-judgmental.
There's
which
that cut
really
where they're in
surprised
like a dark room, and then you see like that Angela's dad was with another man, and it's just like I don't. It's long.
It's interesting. It's interesting.
This
And
is our
speaking of interesting,
Pride Month episode.
This is our Pride Month episode. Oh God. Oh, it just hit me. Oh, I'm very sorry. But I think with that we need to talk about the elephant in the room, which means we need to talk about the ending of Sleepaway Camp, the most infamous part of the whole franchise.
So the movie does play out a lot like a whodunit. We're trying to find out who the killer is, and one thing I would say doesn't completely work in this movie for a lot of people is I've seen it with a few people, and a lot of them do guess the ending, like guess part of the ending. They guess who the killer is.
Yeah,
They don't guess the final part.
the final
But
twist.
just I personally one of my favorite shots is. All right, if we're just going to spoil it,
Yeah,
Angela is the killer.
Angela is the killer.
Well-
Angela's just been basically getting revenge. And also, Angela is transgender. Angela is, to use the correct terminology, I believe, assigned male at birth. Because what happens is, for a lot of the movie, we're led to believe that Angela's brother Peter is the one who dies in the accident. At the end of the movie, it's revealed
Angela. Died.
no,
it was her sister, who's not named Angela, but some other sister.
the sister was the one who died at birth, and the
died
and the
in boat.
born male survivor is raised by crazy Aunt Martha as a girl,
Yep.
which is okay. Let's dive into the complexities of this ending, because I think what needs to be said is that there is a history in horror of the archetype of the crazy transgender killer. Like, we see this in a lot of movies. We even see this in a lot of great horror movies. We see this in stuff like Silence of the Lambs and even to some degree in Psycho. And it's a very complicated archetype that's been around for a long time and has a lot of harmful repercussions.
And it's also, like, one of the arguments I see, which it's very easy to see this as problematic, and mainly because that's the final shot of the movie, is we just see, basically what they did was they hired in the production, they hired a local college kid, gave him a mask of Angela, and then just said, go streaking, just take off your clothes and we're going to shoot you. And the final shot is naked Angela with a big dick. And
well, no, that's not the final shot. The final shot is
As a close-up.
Angela's face as
But
she just screams this absolutely horrifying primal howl, and then it freeze frames. And
Oh, no, she
basically
doesn't
the film-
scream. She doesn't scream. She just goes, ah.
And it's creepy. It's creepy, and like the film kind of degrades under it. It's like this horrifying final moment.
But the thing is, though, I always think it's funny. It's like, I feel like Angela being a man is not as, it should not be the final, it should be Angela is the killer. But instead she's a killer and she's a man? It's like, done. It's like, that's like, once you say that the cute, shy girl is the killer, it's kind of hard to build on, like, add to that. And make
Unless
it
you
more
go
intimidating.
for like the most out of left field twist that you could have, which they did. And anyways, getting back to that, there is a really troubling history with sort of this archetype. But the thing about Sleepaway Camp is there have been actual sort of queer reevaluations of this film, and it's interesting because this is either something that is, like, obviously really offensive, but there's also a way to interpret this as kind of forward-thinking for its time. Because part of it is that the film is basically asking you to very directly empathize with Angela. That there's a lot of points throughout the film where a lot of sort of her body and gender identity are called into question. Like, a lot of the teasing is about a lot of the bullying she gets is about her body, to a point where she's just forcibly bullied by Judy and some of the other girls because she doesn't want to take her clothes off to go swimming.
Right.
There's a lot of that very directed at, like, femininity and gender. And also, another, I think an even more interesting part of the ending is that instead of just having like the usual, oh, it's like the crazy killer who is transgender, it's the ending is kind of asking you to empathize with Angela by bringing in elements of like actual gender dysphoria. Because the argument you can make with that ending is Angela's basically been living under really strict gender rules that don't fit her. Like, she's been forced to identify with a body that maybe she doesn't identify with. And that's complex. I think even the performance of Aunt Martha kind of plays into this, because Aunt Martha is this incredibly rigid and strict performance. It's this crazy, like, it's like a stereotype of a stereotype. It's this insane, elaborate performance, which kind of I've read discussed in some queer criticism of this film, that, like, the person who is sort of raising Angela under these strict gender norms has basically adopted gender as this kind of performance. It leads to this real complexity, because the story, I think, frames her in one way. Like, it frames her in this way where it's asking us to have a lot of empathy for her and understand what she's going through and, like, sympathize with, like, this experience of, like, feeling that your body isn't right and having to deal with, like, people who bully you for it and, like, living under these rigid gender norms. But then the cinematography of that ending frames it another way where it's kind of framed so you have to gawk at Angela's naked body. And it's complicated, because even the film itself is very conflicted on whether you can read this as empathetic or exploitative. And that's what makes this ending really, really interesting to me, because it's so complex. It has a lot of actual layers that you can read thematically. And, like, you can read it as progressive. That's a valid interpretation. You can read it as regressive. That's a valid interpretation. It leaves so much up to how you want to read the film. And I think whether unintentionally or not, that's really interesting.
We're talking about a 80s slasher, just to remind everyone.
Yeah.
So that, honestly, though, yeah, I agree.
It's a really compelling ending, because it goes a bit deeper than you'd usually get with, like, the kind of shock for this genre. It's still meant as a shock, but...
Oh, it's the faces and everything. It is shocking.
But it's very ultimately sympathetic towards Angela, which is the film as a whole. This is a slasher movie that kind of makes you empathize and care about the killer.
And the director agrees that there's one scene that makes the killer less empathetic that he would take out. Robert Hiltzik said he would probably take out, I believe, was a bunch of kids throw sand at Angela, so she kills a bunch of younger kids, and that was he's like, yeah, that was a little too far, but
yeah, which very much confirms that the intention of the film is that you're supposed to empathize with Angela. You're supposed to see the film kind of through her eyes, and the ending isn't like as much of like the usual, oh, they're secretly the killer, as much as you realize that's why all this has been happening. That it's just like a sheltered kid who doesn't really conform to usual gender norms, and is raised in this very strict and repressive household, and who doesn't really know how to function in the rest of the world, just being pushed way too far by just unrelentingly cruel peers.
I would love to see how Robert Hiltzik interprets his own movie. Like,
that would be very interesting to see. I kind of wonder a little bit how he interprets it because of what we get to later in this series, when he actually comes back to the franchise. But
I will say, yeah, I'm really a bit nervous to know what he thinks about it really, because if it turns out he's like, no, yeah, it's just transphobia, I'm like, oh, that makes the movie a little less fun. But
I mean, I think it's still fair to, like, there's a lot of times that people, like, reclaimed films out of their original context. Like, that's the whole idea of Death of the Author. Like, even if it's, like, not Hiltzik's intention, there are, like, actual queer critics and, like, queer fans who have reclaimed this movie, and I think that's really fascinating to me. That something that could so easily be read as just, like, simply kind of transphobic was reclaimed by the fan base as somewhat of an icon.
And just a reminder, when we mentioned earlier that this was a very queer film, we're not just talking about this part in the ending. We're talking about the whole movie.
We're talking about the whole movie. There's a lot of queer gays in this. There's a lot of, and I'm usually with these movies, you get a lot of male gaze where it's like focusing on female bodies. There's a lot of focus on male bodies with this one. Almost comparable to, I'd say, something like Slumber Party Massacre. Like, where it's really detached from the usual male gaze you get in these movies, where it's just a lot of focus on, like, sort of masculinity to, like, a very homoerotic level. I think that's really interesting. It's something you don't because a lot of 80s slashers are very male gaze heavy. Like,
Yes.
we've literally developed a system to rank how exploitative a film is based on how quickly into you just get pointless nudity. We have named it the Fulci scale after Lucio Fulci's house by the cemetery, which currently holds the world record at
10.
20 seconds into the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of male gaze usually in these movies. To see one that's this detached from it is very interesting.
Right. It's just a bunch of guys in tight shorts walking around and, just working out and whatnot. And
Very lovingly framed by the camera.
God. Yeah, Robert Hiltzik, I don't know.
It's a complex film. It's
and you can, that's the thing, you can watch this as a very problematic film, a very progressive film, or just a really fun movie, because I do find this movie really fun.
Yeah, it is.
It's got a fun hangout vibe with realistic kids that are sometimes very hard to watch, and then some really good, mystery and kills.
Some really good mystery, some actually disturbing deaths, and like some genuine horror.
I like
a very complex, interpretable ending that is kind of both progressive and problematic at the same time, in ways where you can read either side into it and take away what you will.
I mentioned earlier that there was people saw this movie. I thought that it was maybe too predictable for a lot of people, and there's just one part of the movie I wanted to mention that I thought was funny. So apparently, the mother of Felissa Rose did not want her to be doing the actual killings. He didn't want to see it. So when it was someone else's hands or whatnot, I think they used Jonathan Tiersten, who played Ricky. I think they used his hands for all those shots. And there's one part where we see the silhouette of Angela when she's about to kill someone. And what they did is they just put Jonathan Tiersten, I believe, Ricky, in a wig. And you can see in the restoration, which is what we saw, you can just see it's not Angela, just someone else in a wig, leading me to believe there are multiple killers.
There are multiple Angelas.
Ricky's also a killer.
I see you're going by the multiple Angelas theory.
Multiple Angelas. It makes sense.
The many Angelas theory.
Oh, also the head counselor is insane. He's so certain Ricky is the killer. And
He literally tries to murder
He
Ricky.
almost beats him to death. Just this kid.
Yeah.
Because the older counselor was having a relationship with a counselor there who I believe was underage, which is gross. Yeah, there's some grossness. Also, the beehive scene, though, we didn't talk about that. That part's great. That part's great.
The part where it's just somebody gets stung to death with bees.
Not the bees.
I knew you were gonna make that joke.
Yes.
All right.
Classic joke. Anyways.
No.
So I would recommend this to anyone.
This is a very interesting slasher. It's definitely one of the more unique 80s slashers. It does a lot to really set itself apart from the crowd while still sort of fitting that classic vibe. So if you're looking for like a very classic 80s slasher that has a lot to interpret and a little bit more to think over than others, I would recommend this.
Yeah, you take what you bring to it, I guess.
So that was Sleepaway Camp. That's a good film.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. The film was dedicated to the director's mom. It says, for mom, a doer. I don't know.
I wonder what his mom feels about that film.
I wonder if I made like a cult classic slasher film. I said my mom helped inspire this, and she would be like, "Oh, well,
cool.
Thanks." She would be honored. I think. I hope.
Well, that's Sleepaway Camp. That's a good movie.
Recommend. And now we're on
God. Oh boy. Now we're into the fun part of this episode, because this is the hardest we've seen a series go downhill.
Yeah, it's good.
Like, I don't know if it's the worst we've seen in this program. There's probably a point where this is the worst you see in this program, but it is the steepest decline in quality. And I'd say it's very steadily just going vertically downhill with each film until it breaks the surface of the earth.
I will say, Leprechaun, all the movies aren't great, but with, the first one, there was a consistent level, for the most part, of not greatness, and then it dropped down to, Into Hood and whatnot. Same with Children of the Corn. A pretty steady level of meh-ish, and then, a big jump down. But
this one, we start off good, we plummet into hell, and then it just keeps getting worse. I'm just gonna say this off the bat, none of these sequels are good. These are terrible movies. I do not like them.
Yeah.
And, oh god, we have to talk about all of them.
So
Oh,
This-
oh boy.
this movie starts with
Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers, which is directed by Fritz Gordon, Michael
Fritz
A.
Lang.
Simpson, written by Fritz Gordon. This one, we immediately get a recast for Angela, who is now played by Pamela Springsteen, Bruce Springsteen's daughter.
And I will say,
What?
it's no Felissa Rose, they went in a completely different direction. If Felissa Rose is a great character, Angela is a great character. This Angela is more like Freddy Krueger if Freddy was a Puritan. You know, with all the quips, very high energy, always.
Wait, no, she's not Bruce Springsteen's daughter. She's Bruce Springsteen's sister.
Sister, interesting.
She's apparently a photographer.
I think you got to hand to her. She gives it her all in this performance.
She tries.
I do not like the direction they went with this character, but you got to say, with the script, she went for it. She did not hold back.
She
and
does
God
not
bless
hold
her.
back in either of the 2 movies she's in. Or 2 and parts.
So,
yeah. Well,
The first thing that stands out is, so Angela is released from a mental institution.
Angela has a sex change surgery.
So it starts with a campfire. No, it starts with...
It starts with the MGM logo, which is weird seeing on a Sleepaway Camp movie. Seeing a major studio want to put their mark on this is bizarre.
Remind me, does this start...
It feels wrong.
Does this start with the campfire story? Or
Yeah,
does
this
it
starts
start
with the campfire
Or does it
story.
start with Angela killing the other counselor and taking her...
Oh no, it starts with the campfire story, where it's just the recap of the first movie.
Right, and then it was really progressive because they're like, some kid was like, he's like, and then Angela, she did this, and then the guy says, "Don't you mean he?" And he says, "No." He's like, "Not anymore."
She got a sex change, and it's like,
she.
hey, good for Angela, like getting the medical help she wants, like good for
Even
her.
if it was forced on her by her crazy aunt, but you know, it makes her happy.
Yeah,
She's
she's
gonna
happy. That's good.
As long she's now going to go back to murdering people. What confuses me is why she didn't change her name. That's the first thing that stood out to
Like
me.
that she's in this movie. She is supposed to be in disguise at this camp, but she is still calling herself Angela.
Like, people are like, "Oh, remember that horrible story of Angela killing all these people?" And then some crazy energetic person.
At near the end of the movie, someone says something along the lines of, "Angela, you were Angela all along." And my reaction is, "Oh no shit! How did you not figure this out?"
So, so it starts with Angela kills a counselor and takes her place, and then there's like a campfire story, I believe, which is a kind of a staple of slashers in the woods, where you know you have kids telling a ghost story.
This is even more of a conventional slasher than the first one, where it's just like straight kills. And Angela is now just very classical slasher motivation. She's not like going against people who've wronged her. She is now a crazy Puritan who is going against teens for drinking and having sex and doing bad things.
So the first thing that after the first 5 minutes, I noticed a steep downgrade. One in the look of the movie and the cinematography, it looked cheaper, which it was, I think, maybe not, because the first movie was pretty cheap. But also, these are no longer played by realistic teens. These are now your normal.
These are the 20-somethings.
And second of all, the first kill at the camp is so the gore and the violence in the first movie is intense and looks real and visceral,
and it's kind of subtle too.
And subtle. This one, a counselor was, or what camper or something, I don't know. They were
Counselor gets bonked over the head with a log, and then Angela cuts her tongue out with like a pair of scissors.
But in like the most bad magician sort of way, where they cover her mouth with, obviously she's got the fake tongue in her hand, and Angela has it in her hand. Then you see her just like kind of cutting air, and then she leaves like this fake like rubber tongue with no blood around it on her. It's just like such a steep like decline in like the visceralness.
This is not as bad as the kills get.
No, but it was pretty like, because the first movie had a lot of moments where I'm like, oh gosh, ew, whoa, and this one was like, I was just like, I can see the sleight of hand trick. You're not doing it well.
Yeah. This ditches a lot of the stuff from
effects.
the first film. For starters, this movie, whereas the first film has like a lot of homoerotic interpretation, this film is aggressively straight, to the point where we even just get homophobic slurs. A lot of male gaze in this movie.
Almost immediately there's nudity. There's
very fast rate to nudity.
Yeah. there's just like someone goes topless in like the first 5 minutes, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's this kind of movie.
We got a lot of shitty hair metal.
A lot of shitty hair. Oh, we didn't mention that in the first movie. There were a lot of people wearing like band T-shirts. As like someone had an Asia T-shirt, and I was whole time humming "Only Time Will Tell." This one has, you know.
This one they got actual music, but the music they got is pretty universally shit.
The camp seems much more dead, much more quiet, much smaller.
And they also got the rights to the camping song that Angela sings, and we get a lot of flashbacks.
It's quite possibly my favorite part of the series. Angela has a song called "Oh, I'm a Happy Camper." It's an earworm. It's so good. Everyone hates it. It's like the Gummy Bear song for slashers. You can't unhear it.
And then the movie makes sure you won't unhear it because it uses it fucking constantly over the next 3 films.
I'm a happy camper. I love the summer sun.
We'll get to how it used it because there's a flashback later in this movie where we get clips of that sequence laid over with just like random blue tinted clips from previously in the film, which is how you can tell that this movie is out of ideas, because this is an 80-minute long movie. If you have to have flashbacks to previously in the movie in your 80-minute long movie, I think you're having a problem filling the runtime.
Yeah. Also, this movie has like, I guess they want to be in competition. They're like trying to start beef with other franchises because Angela.
Both this and 3 try to start beef with.
They're like, she dresses up as Leatherface and kills Freddy.
Kills kids dressed as Freddy and Jason.
I don't know if it's a love letter to those movies, but it seems more like a "we're better than you," and they are not.
It seems more like
this is not.
This is like them trying to start like a bar fight in a biker bar. It's not going to end well for them. I have in my Max. I have a question for you. I have in my notes with surrounded by question marks. White guy doing a Louis Armstrong impression. What was that? I don't remember.
I don't even remember that part either.
I can't even remember.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah, and we're like, oh, that won't fly very well in 2020, or what?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
I'm looking at my notes. I have no real tension or plot, just kills. Because there is no plot to this. The entire plot to this movie is just Angela kills people, and that's it.
My next note is there was like some of the counselors were like, we're going to do the panty raid, and all of a sudden I just remembered Patrick Starr. I guess you're going to miss the panty raid. And all I can think about is SpongeBob, because this movie is more like Trauma than anything, but Trauma's better.
I mean, it's like Trauma, and they even have like a point where somebody's basically drowned in poop.
Yeah, it's very Trauma, but I feel like Trauma has a little more soul.
Trauma at least tried. This is like Trauma if they never tried.
So here's what Angela does. When people are bad campers, she kills them and then tells everyone she sent them home. And this gets everyone on her bad side. And all the counselors and campers don't like her. That's just, she keeps sending people away. There is one moment in this movie that I legitimately like, that I actually thought was creepy. She basically has sent everyone home, and it's just one girl left, the final girl. And they're in the cabin together, and it's like nighttime. They gotta go to sleep, and she's stuck in this room, and she doesn't realize there's a killer with her, but she knows something's up. And there was a moment there that I thought was actually really creepy. And then the movie got bad again.
Oh, that's a good way to describe it. And then the movie got bad again. A lot of really shittily written teens. Like, Angela's really into people being virgins this time around. Angela is now entirely a no sex until marriage proponent. Angela's been listening to a lot of Ben Shapiro.
I also realized this movie also has one real connection besides Angela to the first movie. We didn't mention this, but in the first movie, there was a cop who, earlier in the movie, he had a mustache.
No, that's the third one. That's the
first one. Though, there's a character with a mustache, and then he later replaced.
We forgot to mention the mustache cop.
Mustache cop. Basically, in between shooting days, he shaved his mustache, so they gave him the worst fake mustache.
The worst fake mustache in human history. It's amazing.
And then the son of that character, I believe, is...
No, that's Sleepaway Camp 3. I get why you're mixing Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 up. They're basically indistinguishable.
Oh, okay. So, we can't restart this, but I just realized everything with the truck scene, that's part 3. These movies are interchangeable.
These are interchangeable. We might as well start talking about 3, because I think we've covered everything, except for the ending of 2. At the ending of 2, this movie just stops. This doesn't have an ending. It just kind of stops on like a shot of Angela like picking up the final girl, and then it just stops. This is the same ending as Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead, where they accidentally destroyed the footage they had at the ending, and the editor had to figure something out. This just doesn't have an ending. This is a terrible movie. This is a terrible movie, and it gets worse, because now we're on to Sleepaway Camp 3, Teenage Wasteland.
Wait, am I crazy? So in part 2, wasn't there a chase scene at the end set to xylophone music? I don't know. That was in my notes.
I think it was. I think there was.
So, so the reason why I got part 2 and 3 so confused is because the part 3 was greenlit, like, during production of 2. So they basically went right into part 3.
And the thing about part 3 is it is basically the same movie as 2. This is... You could just splice footage from 2 and 3 together, and they would be indistinguishable.
There are reused
because this
sets.
is the same movie. There are reused sets. There are a bunch of flashbacks to 2. There's
a more diverse cast. That's one of my notes. They recycle the flashback from 2. A lot of nudity again.
They just like do exactly pretty much the entire same thing as 2. They just do everything that the second movie did over again, pretty much with no changes. But this time it's worse.
The characters are named after West Side Story
They're
characters.
named after West Side Story characters. Oh God, I forgot that. Oh no, I forgot how bad this was. Cause, okay, don't get me wrong. Sleepaway Camp 2 is bad. It is a terrible, plotless, boring mess of a movie. Sleepaway Camp 3 is worse in every single way. It's just, it looks even cheaper. They're just reusing the sets. They're basically remaking the same scenes. Angela sings I'm a Happy Camper again.
So one of my favorite, there was it this one or part 2 that had that really funny scene where that girl was like, well, I know in part 3 there was that really there's one scene that I liked where he's like, oh, you're the killer, Angela. What are you going to do? How are you going to kill me? A knife? An axe? You're going to dismember me? What? And then what are you going to use? And she says, a gun. And then she shoots him. And I was like, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's like the one joke that works.
There are a lot of jokes, and they almost all fall flat.
This movie has a more diverse cast, which is cool. What's not cool is that this is somehow more racist. There's a lot more racism in this movie. Some of it is performed by the black characters. Everybody in this movie is incredibly racist to each other.
Does
the
Angela
white
rap?
people are... Yes, Angela raps in this movie! Yes, because the idea of Sleepaway Camp 3 is that in Sleepaway Camp 2, they open the camp again. It's closed. In Sleepaway Camp 3, they open the camp again, but this time it's a camp where privileged students can get to know underprivileged students. So half of the students are just like white yuppies, and the other half are like racially diverse inner city punks. And like, I am someone who loves punk. Like, I am somebody who is down for depictions of punk in any movie.
And West Side Story.
This movie doesn't fucking get punk at all. It's just like people in leather jackets who are assholes to each other. The soundtrack is metal. The soundtrack is hair metal. Hair metal is not punk. How do you not get this? This movie also really doesn't like or understand rap. This movie's idea of rap is very Vanilla Ice, but before Vanilla Ice even existed.
I will say...
Why does Angela rap?
This is a controversial opinion. I will put this one a bit higher than part 2, maybe.
Oh no, it's worse for me. It's much worse.
Because I feel like it's just has a tad bit more connective tissue in terms of story. The first one, I felt like it was like more of a clip show of death scenes and murders and whatnot.
Yes, but did 2 have the scene where a guy just burps incessantly at the police? That he protects the police by burping at them.
Yeah, at least, I don't know, they're both awful, not worth it, there's nothing to look into, there's no...
What are the rules of the camp? What are the rules of the camp in 3?
So, if part 1 was somehow, like, talking about queer theory and whatnot, this movie is, this duology, wants you to know it is heterosexual and really likes boobs, you know, this movie is straight.
These movies are incredibly straight.
And, like,
And also, this one wants you to know that it is very, very incredibly white.
Oh, man.
Because, I mean, keep in mind, like, the real only survivors of this are the white people. The white people are the survivors of this movie.
Well, there was only one survivor in this one. Like, in this one...
There's two.
There were... Oh, that's right. In the second one, there was one
Again,
maybe.
we're getting these two movies mixed up because these two movies are fucking identical.
No, but I remember now, because in part 2, the girl you thought died, then she came back and you're like, oh, she's alive, and then she runs out and she finds a truck, she waves it down, and it's Angela, and is she dead? We don't know. It's never brought up again. This one is she, like, ties people together. Okay, right. They escape eventually, beat up Angela, and then she goes to the hospital, in which she kills
and then she
the
stabs
two
the people
orderlies.
in the ambulance, and then the movie stops.
Yeah, until we get to part 4. So do you recommend 2 and 3?
No! No, God, no!
Moving on.
No! Do not watch these movies! And yet...
It gets worse.
Gets even worse. Because it is now time to talk about the single worst movie we have watched for the podcast as of yet. A film that I cannot even remotely describe as a movie.
All right.
Sleepaway Camp 4: The Survivor.
Can I-
AKA... Okay, you start. You start.
I will
because-
say, this movie was in production for like a week or two. They filmed some stuff, and then it got canned. And then they're like, hey, can we take this in old footage and make a new movie out of it? Basically, I compared this while watching it to they took this dead movie and put it in the pet cemetery.
This
where
is
then
cinematic necromancy.
Came back to life as something unholy. that should,
And something unholy.
to quote Judd Crandall, sometimes dead is better. This is not a movie, it's a clip show.
This is a fucking clip show! This is a clip show of the previous 3 Sleepaway Camp movies that they just got together with random footage installed to just...
So,
This was made in 2012!
it was... Okay, this movie was, starts out with... They didn't have enough footage, so there's just a screen, a blue screen with text saying, like...
Saying,
This girl has amnesia.
this
forget her
girl
name.
has amnesia, she was involved in the massacres of the previous movies, she's going back to the campsite to figure out what's going on. She's Angela.
Yeah.
She's Angela. It's so fucking obvious from the first second that the movie cannot make it any less obvious. She is Angela.
The movie then cuts to a picture, or to a video of the girl, whatever her name was.
Lying on a dock in a
Lying on
bikini.
a dock in a bikini.
Flashing back to the previous
And then,
movies.
for the next 45 minutes, that's the only new footage
That's
we get.
the only footage we see. The same shot of this woman in a bikini over and over and
It's like,
over again.
I remember that one massacre, and there's just some random scene from one of the other movies. Yeah, no, it is, there's not a lot of notes for this. It was, as I wrote, seemed like it was edited by an unpaid intern.
This movie is one of the most weirdly edited things I've seen. Because, okay, you'd think clip show. They'd go through the movies one by one, like show the best bits of each. How is this thing edited?
So, okay, this was funny. So, Quinn and I, we found the movie, but we can only, for whatever reason, watch it flip. So we all...
The only way this is really available is on a Daily Motion.
Or if you buy, like, the collector's pack. But it's a 70-minute movie. And on the Daily Motion, it was in 3 parts that added up to 90 minutes. And after about half an hour, I was nervous, and I said to Quinn, I think this might be a fan edit. I don't think this is a real one, because the real one's only 70 minutes. This goes on longer.
And this is edited like an insane film.
You do not... It's so bad, we didn't know if this was a real movie or not, or if this was just some fan had an afternoon.
And it was the real movie.
The real movie.
That's the twist here. That this really was the movie that is edited completely at random. They just jump between scenes from the first 3 movies with no real reason. And there's no real reason why they throw different scenes in where they do. They just have, like, randomly selected clips of the 3 movies that are just, like, randomly cut with each other. There's moments where they, like, parallel moments where there's one kill from, like, I believe 2 or 3 that they parallel with Angela's parents getting killed, and I'm like, why are you cutting it like this? And I also need to mention that all 3 of the films that they flashback all 4 of the films involved in this, including the films that this is, are completely different quality. And I don't mean that in terms of, like, quality as a film. I mean, they got different quality versions of the films to edit. And they couldn't... They got different rips. So the first Sleepaway Camp looks terrible, because it's like this crusty, extremely low-quality digital copy of it. But it's even worse, because they can't mix the sound design between them. So it's just way too loud.
I think, yeah. So the movie ends eventually.
And the new footage looks terrible.
Yeah, there's new footage, because I did kind of, even though 2 and 3 were terrible, I did want to see what they would do with a 4. And what we saw was not very... I heard...
It was not very movie.
I'm not sure that... I think I read that in the original outline of the movie, the new character with amnesia wasn't going to be Angela. It was going to be like a red herring, but in this one they didn't have enough footage, so they just went with the red herring is the truth. And it's like she's being chased through the woods by a ranger, and then she sees some other guy in the woods, and then there's an attempted rape scene, kind of?
Does she kill them? I don't know what the plot of this film is.
I think she eventually kills the ranger, and then the movie ends with her, like, I am now Angela, she stands by a tree. The movie ends, and, yeah, that was... the thing is, I don't know if I can say it's the worst movie that we've seen so far, because it isn't really a movie.
It's not a fucking movie.
It was quite possibly the worst experience.
It's so bad. It's so bad that it almost approaches a level of you have to be willingly fucking with the audience at this point in the name of high art. It's not so bad it's good. It's not so bad it's agonizing. It's so bad it's Godard. Because it reaches, like, the late Godard point of this is a film made to fuck with the audience, to just mess with you and like troll your definition of what a film is. But it's all done by accident. And it's so bad. There's literally one line where, like, in narration, they're talking about Angela, it's like, maybe it was in her genes, and I'm like, oh, cool, we're going into eugenics now. This fucking movie broke me. This is...
So do you recommend it?
No! No, Christ,
I
no!
I highly recommend it.
No! Do not watch this movie. This isn't, like, bad movie bad. This isn't fucking, like, Miles the Hands of Fate bad. This isn't, like, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen bad. This is The Ring Tape bad.
You would think by cutting...
This is physically bad for you.
You would think that cutting back to the first film would make it somewhat watchable, but would be
no,
wrong.
Because the first film is, A, extremely low quality rip, and B, cut so much it's basically incomprehensible because they're just jumping randomly between the 3 movies at just, like... And then the volume keeps switching back and forth between each movie, and it's so garbage. It's... Oh.
Yeah, this movie
God.
is a
it hurts.
fever dream. Not a fever dream. A fever dream would be something like Houseu. This is more like this is what you see before you die if you've been an evil person.
This is like the dying hallucinations of a franchise. This is like when a franchise dies, it sees something like this flash before its eyes.
Are we done talking about this one? Do you want to move on to
Yes,
right.
Let's move on.
I want to say for part 5, a movie I really enjoy is Halloween 2 by Rick Rosenthal.
Yeah.
What if Rick Rosenthal, who made this very good slasher, decided to come back to the franchise years later and try it again? And it couldn't possibly be terrible. Oh wait, we got Halloween Resurrection. What did we get with Sleepaway Camp when the director and writer returns? This version is Halloween Resurrection. Maybe
Return
worse.
Return to Sleepaway Camp. And
this is more like if John Carpenter.
I'll give it this. It is, by pure technicality, better than Sleepaway Camp 4. But that's not saying much.
It's really not.
I mean, this movie opens with the worst plot recap song I've heard in a film. Because it's a plot recap song where the singer cannot fucking sing.
Sleepaway Camp!
Sleepaway Camp!
Sleepaway!
It's a tone-deaf plot recap song, and not, like, offensive content. It's literally that nobody is singing on key, everything is off key. There are points in this movie on the soundtrack where they cannot keep the tempo, and the drums are playing at a different time than the rest of the music. this is what you have to deal with, people.
I gotta
This movie is bad.
The soundtrack to the first movie was so good, and it has why would something with that atmosphere go into this kind of rock? Like, why did the sequels all choose to have this heavy hair rock theme, like this, reoccurring choice of this kind of music? Which I don't dislike this kind of music. It just doesn't. I don't get why they picked it for Sleepaway Camp.
I don't know, but this one, oh god, this one is
so
terrible.
The choice for the main character was an interesting one, because I don't know if they wanted us to think that this would be another Angela situation where this guy, he's acting evil and is being
This
bullied.
man named Alan.
So I was like, is this what they're trying to do? Make us think that maybe he is the killer because he is unhinged? But yeah,
This guy's just an asshole.
He's just
Alan is just one of the most obnoxious protagonists I've seen in a horror movie since Jeff in Saw 3. Yeah, that's right. We are reaching Jeff in Saw 3 bad.
Oh, this guy's worse.
Okay, yeah. This is Jeff in Saw 3, but worse. This makes Jeff seem redeemable.
Well, the thing with I just don't think whatever they were trying to go with this character, by being like, this is a bully character with violent tendencies, I think is what they're going for. Instead, they're going for the most obnoxious, mean-spirited character, and when he gets bullied, I'm going to say, I don't condone bullying, but he deserves it.
The way I describe this movie is it's the first movie where it's like, everybody's like mean, and like Angela's kind of like alone here, but they forgot to have an Angela. So it's just, everybody's just an asshole.
Right, it's like, are we supposed to feel bad for him because his only friends are frogs?
His only friends are
honestly,
frogs, and then his
other friends are scared of him
and then
because he keeps threatening them and beating
his
them
friends
up.
are threatening him, but then his other friends like just like kick the frogs and later just skin the frogs alive.
Like, yeah, you gotta.
This movie is
I think
fucking
that's
mess.
what breaks this movie. It's not a great movie by any means, but what breaks it for me is the character of Alan.
They're
is
just
so
all
dislikable.
Fucking awful.
If he was another actual Angela, this wouldn't be a good movie, but I think I would like it more than the other movies.
Like for comparison,
Because at least it looks closer in tone.
the
to
original
first.
Sleepaway Camp opens with like a lot of very atmospheric shots, this very good music. This film opens with the characters lighting their farts on fire.
Right, very
This
quickly.
is the comparison we're going for here. This movie, I described it in my notes as, this is Wet Hot American Summer if it forgot to have jokes. It is just, on a visual level, this is indistinguishable from Wet Hot American Summer, which is a parody.
Nah, Wet Hot American Summer looks better.
Yeah.
I will say, also,
This movie basically has a laugh track.
this movie has the worst insult, or worst catchphrase / insult I've heard. So I was joking about the eat shit and live diss, which is great. Alan's catchphrase is your ass stinks. I mean, most butts stink, but that's just, I don't know why that's his catchphrase. He says that at least 10 times.
I need to just keep breathing. I need to stay calm. I need to stay calm or this franchise
He
is
is
going
so-
to crack my fucking brain open.
He is so unlikable, this character of Alan, and I know the actor hated the role. He said it didn't work for him, but this movie brings back some reoccurring characters and actors.
Barely.
We get a bit of Ricky,
Little bit of Ricky
played
near the
again
end.
by the Jonathan Kirsten.
And we get Ronnie, the guy who tried to kill Ricky. So that's fun.
So the thing is with Ricky, I think he did a good job in the first movie because he was a kid playing a kid. This movie, you can tell he doesn't act anymore because the performances in this movie were like you can tell he's a musician now and he should definitely do music.
Yeah.
It's a little mean, but we also get what's his name back from the movie. We get Ronnie, Paul D'Angelo. We get the character Isaac Hayes plays a chef.
Again? Why does Isaac Hayes just keep getting typecast as a chef?
And I will say,
This is his final film role.
What happened to him in this movie?
I don't know, he just disappeared.
I honestly
Just like Robert Earl Jones.
just like Robert Earl Jones, but yeah, he also kind of disappeared. But I don't know, it's just
Also, this movie is terribly made. Like, I think one of the best ways I can describe how terribly made this is is there's a literal point in this movie where they openly fuck up the editing. There's a point where they're just clearly trying to trim shots together, and they left a frame of another shot in between two other shots. So there's just this little flash of a completely different image. And we had to rewind and make sure that was not a mistake. That was in there. They screwed up the edit. The audio on this, so there's a phenomenon called audio peaking in sort of recording audio, where if an audio sample that you're recording is just way too loud for the microphone, it'll just like not only like peak the audio, it'll just like lead to this file that whenever it gets loud, it just gets really crunchy and horrible. I say this because this movie has near constant audio peaking. Like, they are clearly recording the soundtrack way too loud. The music itself is mixed at nearly the same volume as the dialogue in some scenes, where you just cannot hear what they're saying, because the soundtrack is drowning them out. The DVD only has subtitles in Spanish, so we couldn't tell what some of the friggin' dialogue was. And then there's basically sitcom scene transitions with, like, phased to wide shots and, like, jangling music over it. I said big Adam Sandler energy in my notes. And then there's the kills. There's the kills in this movie. Oh, God. Actually, before we get to the kills, I do want to note that there is some weird costume design in this, where Alan just clearly has one shirt. This man only owns one shirt, and it gets progressively more fucked up and stained over the course of the movie.
So...
But I think we do need to talk about the kills, because the kills are so bad. Wait, I forgot about the paintball scene!
Yeah, there's a scene where they, after Alan has been harassing everyone, and, like, was this the part where he's like, I'm not gonna leave until you agreed to go to a secluded spot for a date with me? He basically, like, pressures this poor girl into going on a date with him.
No, because he's playing paintball with the others. The reason... there's a paintball game scene, and the reason I wanted to bring up the paintball game scene is, Max, I have this question for you. Answer me this. What time of day does the paintball scene take place at?
Yesn't.
All of them. Like, before they cut to the paintball scene, it's clearly day out. And then when Alan goes to get ready for paintball, it's night, but it's supposed to be maybe day, and at the same time as the rest of that scene, probably. But then they're filming day for night, so you cannot tell what time of day this scene takes place at. This film breaks time.
I will say the kills in this movie are definitely weak, but I'll argue they're the strongest out of the sequels, because we have that bed scene where there are spikes on a bed and then the killer jumps on the
Okay,
spikes.
sure, we have that.
And there's that really dumb, annoying scene, but I think it was supposed to be funny. A spear breaks out of
It's just
out of like a hole in the ground, and then they keep looking into it. They're like,
they
see,
keep
something
looking
came out
into
of
the
there.
hole.
And it's
they keep
just,
looking into the hole
it
that
goes
the
on
spear
so
came
long.
out of, and they just stretch it out so long, and it's just like, you cannot possibly be this stupid. These characters cannot possibly be this stupid. But that's not the kill I want to talk about. That's not the kill I want to talk about.
The kill of Weed, the character of Weed.
Yes, we need to talk about. This is the only time in a slasher movie I have seen a kill performed via forced spontaneous combustion. Angela force feeds a camp drug dealer gasoline, ties him to a chair, duct tapes his mouth shut with a "Winners Don't Do Drugs" sticker, then sticks a lit
Which was for no one
blunt
but like her, I guess.
in his mouth.
And then he explodes.
And he explodes! Angela makes someone explode in this movie! What are we talking about anymore? What has happened?
Also, we don't know it's Angela at this point, because it's a mystery of who the killer is again.
But we know it's Angela.
But
It's a
we
fucking Sleepaway Camp movie. We know it's
And
Angela.
also, Felissa Rose was, they said it was her, and then they have the most obvious, like who Angela is. They have a police officer with obvious prosthetics.
They have
with
a police
voice
officer
changer
who,
box.
obvious prosthetics, who claims that he lost his voice to smoking and speaks with like a voice changer, which is another weird-ass South Park parallel. I can only presume this is a fictional movie from South Park that somehow got unleashed on the real world, and that means there is a barrier in the fiction-reality continuum that is just broken.
Oh, yeah, and so, yeah, it turns out at the very end, what can top the shocking ending of the first. Oh, the guy we expected, the guy we knew was Angela, is Angela.
Yeah. Angela's seeing someone alive and then laughs, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, what happened to Alan? I don't think we.
I don't even
beat
know
up a
what.
bit, and then he's.
Alan gets beat up a bit. The guy who was skiing the frogs gets skinned alive. I'm just trying to.
There was a scene with like the fishhook scene, or not fishhook. There's like a wire, and they cut off.
They cut off a man's
dick.
Personal parts. And the sound they make when they're pulled off is like a
suction.
plunger. It's a plunger noise.
He just goes,
It's a fucking plunger noise. The one guy gets eaten to death by rats.
And they cut to black.
But it's not like, oh, he has a bird cage mounted on his head.
The rats seemed well behaved.
And then just has and then Angela just sticks two extremely calm looking rats in the cage and they eat him. I say eat in heavy air quotation marks. I don't even know what's going on in this movie. I have in my notes, why is this movie full of sexual harassment?
Yeah, okay. We were talking about how macho the other movies are with the male gaze. I think nothing encapsulates that more than they give Alan the nickname Blowjob because they trick him into smoking cow dung. And then he falls onto his knees, and they say it looks like he's having a blowjob. So that's his new nickname. And at night, they harass him by simultaneously chanting all these guys, walking at night chanting, blowjob, blowjob. And it just keeps getting, as they surround him.
It's like a cult thing, and Alan goes insane.
It is.
Alan, actually goes insane because of it. And then, someone actually, grabs Alan's crotch and lifts him off the ground. And so everybody is being an asshole. Everybody is sexually harassing each other. This...
No, this was this was an upsetting return because it's
supposed to be Robert Hiltzick's big return to the franchise. It's supposed to be Melissa Rose's big return to the franchise. They should have never come back. They shouldn't have...
Sometimes that is better.
Max, I'm just going to preempt you on this because I know you're going to ask me this question. Would you recommend this movie?
Yes. No, I would not recommend this.
Do not watch this movie. Do not watch this movie, for the love of God.
I'll say this. If you hate the first movie, you will not like this. If you love the first movie, you'll also not like this. But
if you hate yourself, you probably still won't like this.
Yeah, I said my one good thing was there was at least a more competent score aside from the hair metal stuff.
I don't want to say that there might be one good thing.
Yeah,
the score was still mixed terribly, and then there's that one song where the percussion is really fucked up, so...
Yeah, this was the worst thing to happen in a forest since...
This is the worst thing to happen in a forest since Sleepaway Camp 4. Which is the worst thing to happen in a forest since Sleepaway Camp 3.
And Alan grew up and became Logan Paul. Haha, topical, am I right? Haha. Because forest stuff and... he's being obnoxious. I'm making a funny. Anyway,
I think this movie has just collectively killed our
Let us rank them.
Okay, rankings.
Honestly, I think Son of Sleepaway Camp. We didn't watch it, but it has to be at least number 2.
It has to be, yeah.
It's gotta be better than
Please, God. It can't be any worse than the... Okay.
My least favorite is gonna obviously be 4.
It's 4 for me.
I don't count that as a movie.
It's not a movie. It's just a random smash up of footage that they have.
It's very easy to not see it because it's very hard to find, kind of, for good reason. So if you want to know what happens to Angela after part 3, you can just assume that, I don't know, she ran for governor. I don't know. Just make up your own ending because part 4 adds more questions than answers. And
it's not a movie. It's not a movie.
Yeah, we can't emphasize that.
It's not a movie.
It's a special feature, but the worst special feature.
It's not a movie, but at the same time, it's the worst movie we've seen on the podcast, despite not being a movie. It's that bad.
You agree? So
yeah, I agree. I have nothing else to say on this. I don't want to say anything else on Sleepaway Camp 4. Let's move on so I can forget this thing exists.
My number 2 is going to be a bit shocking.
Wait, number 2?
4. My number 4 is going to be a bit shocking. It is actually number 2. And I put it there because, one, I guess just the shocking decline of quality in the series from a movie I really enjoy to that. hit me more than like going from part 3 to a not movie that I knew going into would mostly be a clip show. Part 2 feels like just a barrage of poorly executed slasher scenes with forgettable characters, and as you can see, we got mixed. I got mixed up pretty heavily with part 3.
Yeah, they're basically indistinguishable.
But I will say that it just there were at least an interesting moment or two in part 3. I don't know. I didn't like any of those, but I'm gonna say part 2 was my second least favorite. My least favorite movie, I guess, if you call it.
My least favorite movie of them is 5. I was mostly bored and confused by Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3. I was mostly confused and angry by Return to Sleepaway Camp. This thing is like one of the most aggressively mean-spirited horror movies I've ever seen. Like, it doesn't even feel like they're having that much fun with it. It's just everybody's an asshole, just for the point of being an asshole. It's just aggressively cruel. It's filled with so many weird technical errors that's like, how did this get released? It's just...
Yeah, they stopped...
Spectacularly incompetent.
They filmed it like 5 years before it was going to be released, and then they said, we have to fix the special effects. But...
Was it worth it?
The special effects
was it worth the 5 years?
The special effects weren't really the problem. So there was some show CGI,
The plot was the problem!
The plot, but also, like... If in those 5
the
years,
mere existence of the movie was the problem.
You just had to get rid of one frame in those 5 years,
and you couldn't do that. You didn't rewatch your movie before you released it. What the hell are you doing?
So yeah, I agree. Anything more to say on that?
No.
All right, my number 3 is kind of tied. I'm gonna put number 5 right now. Return to Sleepaway Camp. It's kind of tied with my number 2. I agree with everything you say. I would say the only... It feels ever so slightly closer in tone to the original, but does it all wrong. The first movie has mean-spirited characters, but on a realistic level...
And it has at least some empathy.
It has empathy.
It's like empathy and understanding. It has none. 5 has none.
I was joking that, like, if I made a Sleepaway Camp and dedicated it to my mom, I think she would be happy. But if I did Return to Sleepaway Camp and said for my mom, I think...
She'd disown you.
Oh, yikes.
Well, it's true.
Yeah, so 5, Alan was a very dislikable protagonist.
Fuck Alan. Alan's
all my homies hate Alan.
Horrible.
So yeah, that's probably that's gonna be my number 3 or number 2.
My number 3 is 3. My number 3 is just like 3 is just it's 2, but it's just 2. It's basic. Let's basically just say my number 3 and number 2 are a tie because they're the same fucking movie. They are just so identical. We cannot tell them apart.
People always say all slashers are the same. Not
these ones are.
This is a case.
These ones are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's 3. 3 I think is marginally worse because say what you will about 2. 2 is bad. 2 is aggressively straight. It has no plot. At least it's not as racist as 3, and at least it didn't personally annoy me by fucking up its depictions of punk. That's not fucking punk, that's hair metal. How do you get this that wrong? Just do your research.
My number 2 is going to actually be number 3, and I put it there partially because, well, I had almost more fun watching Quinn break down watching this over its depiction of punk and West Side Story named characters than I did in the actual movie.
Okay, see, here's the thing. West Side Story is one of my favorite movies. I think that movie is brilliant. It is a beautiful, gorgeously shot, gorgeously acted musical with a lot of good social commentary. Some of the greatest choreography I've ever seen in a film. There are musical numbers I can watch from that movie, even independent of it, that I can still get chills from watching. If you're gonna reference West Side Story, you need a really, really damn good reason to do it, and this did not have one. Like, why are you naming them after West Side Story characters? Is it just because you have, like, rich people and poor people? Like, this is some of the most botched social commentary I've seen. It's like they almost came close to trying to have social commentary, but stopped short of actually trying, and the result is hell. It's hell.
Compared to 2, this one had everything for me. It was just a tad better, a tad bit more connective tissue and story. a tad more better pacing.
That's not saying much.
And, there was one scene in like the kitchen where Angela's walking around and remembering the previous movies that I liked enough.
Oh, you mean the one that's edited like a nightmare you've had after you drink so much cough syrup?
I don't know. There was
That's scored with like the weird slowed down version of I'm a Happy Camper. Is that the one?
maybe it's been a bit, but
and remember, we cannot tell these movies apart.
there were some yeah, I mean, this movie does not hold up.
This is not a good
aggressive,
movie.
it's angry. But I would say it's pick your cyanide capsule and
Pick your poison, yeah.
Exactly. I do not like this, but I think I had a slightly better time. This has Angela rapping, which is just nothing I ever thought I would see.
Nothing we ever needed to see. We don't need Angela rapping.
I don't know, at some point you just gotta, let go of your...
The Angela rap is not something we need in our lives. Oh, God.
Does this have a plot recap song with, or part 5 with Sleepaway? Is that like a plot?
5 has a plot recap song.
Alright, and so...
And as an aficionado of plot recap songs, this ain't it. This isn't like Pet Sematary. This isn't Killer Clowns from Outer Space by the Dickies. This isn't even fucking the Leprechaun rap from Leprechaun in the Hood. That's how low we've fallen, people.
So yeah, number 3 is at number 2. Quinn, I'm assuming
number 2 is number 2. Like it's basically the same movie as 3, but it didn't anger me as much as 3 did. It just mostly bored me. And boring is better than it's not good. It's still really bad and it still pissed me off, but it didn't do it as badly as the rest of the films did.
And that brings us to our shared number 1. Is number
Sleepaway
1.
Camp. It's the original.
The only
movie. Good movie in this. The only movie in this series. This is not a franchise. This is a franchise that had 4 other things. This is a single film that had 4 other things tacked onto it. This is not a franchise. Therefore, retroactively, this episode does not exist.
Oh yikes! That's intense. Yeah, we've talked about 1 probably the most. So there's not a whole lot more I could add except
It's good.
it's super good. I really
It's
like
good.
it.
It's compelling. It's very it's complex in how you want to interpret it. I completely accept people saying that this movie's kind of horrifically offensive. I can accept people saying that it's kind of progressive for its time too. You can make both arguments. That's the interesting part of it.
And the same goes for on a technical and a story level. If people say they don't like it because it's too much of a hangout film, they don't like all the bullying, they don't like the violence. I get it, but for me, this is a very nice movie to watch to the full.
It feels like a movie that has a lot of intent behind it.
Right.
And I think it's not so much deciding whether it's a good or bad movie. It's more determining whether or not you like that intent. And I think that's what's interesting about it to me. That all these decisions, they seem very intentionally made, and it makes it stand out. There's a lot more intentionality than you'll find in any generic slasher, and that's what I appreciate about it.
And so I'm very excited for our next. Is our next episode? Remind me. Are we doing Friday the 13th next, or are we?
Oh no, we're not doing Friday the 13th for a while. Our schedule is up in the air a bit, but though we will still be covering The Ring, probably next episode we will be covering the Blair Witch films, which is going to be a very interesting episode to cover because we get to talk about a largely universally beloved film that really helped set up what we know today as found footage horror, a really fascinating sequel that was really butchered by the studio for being not what they wanted, that is this incredibly ambitious metafictional take on the popularity of the original Blair Witch and how that sort of affected it in the cultural lens, that does a lot of creative stuff with scares, that did a lot of creative stuff with its video release, and then we have Adam Wingard's Blair Witch.
Which Quinn and I differ.
We differ on opinions on it. Max thinks it's an entertaining
I
movie.
had fun.
I'm very confused by him, but we'll discuss this next time. This is going to be our first real difference of opinions on the podcast.
Yeah, we've never had an extreme. So far, probably our biggest. I think our biggest difference in opinion was maybe Children of the Corn Genesis, just because I liked Billy Drago's performance, and that's it.
Yeah. This is actually going to be our first real difference of opinion, but Next time we will probably be doing Blair Witch. We're still going to get around to Ring. Ring will probably be sort of, unless we can cover them all in one episode, it'll probably be a two-parter, because actually it's definitely going to be a two-parter, because we have to talk about Spiral, and Spiral's going to take fucking forever to talk about. Spiral's just going to be
Spiral is its own episode.
Spiral, the last 30 minutes of Spiral, let's just say this in advance. I cannot hype this up enough. The last 30 minutes of Spiral, you are going to see us lose our minds in real time as we try to explain
already did.
what the hell is happening in this movie.
They saw us lose our mind over Sleepaway Camp sequels already. But
They saw us lose
it's
our
a
mind over
different
Sleepaway Camp 4. They saw us lose our minds over Leprechaun in the Hood. They heard us lose our minds over Children of the Cord Resurrection. You're gonna get to hear us lose our minds again over Spiral. Because what the hell is going on in Spiral?
People do not like Spiral, but we're not talking about the Saw movie.
We're not talking about the Saw movie. We're talking about the Ring movie. And
It is big brain. It is weird.
it is
Anyway,
it is, yeah, it's a film. But anyways, we will probably be doing Ring.
Unlike
But I'm
Sleepaway
going
Camp
to say
4.
in advance that on Friday, August 13th, we will be covering the Friday the 13th series, including plenty of sidebars. Probably our most sidebar-heavy series yet, because there's a lot to discuss with this series. There's a lot.
We've done ABCs of Death, and we analyzed each episode, or each mini-short, but that will probably not be as long as our Friday the 13th
Oh no, we're going to have to talk about so much with Friday the 13th.
So follow us on Facebook.
Follow us on Facebook, follow us
Tinder.
on Twitter.
Follow me on Tinder. All you ladies, please message me, and we can talk about Sleepaway Camp sequels.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll get a lot of matches.
Like and subscribe.
I'm also on Christian Mingle. That was funnier in my head.
I think these movies have drained the funny from us. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. We're very, very sorry. Please don't watch the Sleepaway Camp sequels. We like you too much for that. Except for you, Alan.
Yeah, frickin'
Except for you, Alan.
And Pam. What's their name again?
Judy.
Judy. Blah.
Where did you get Pam from?
The Office, probably.